All right, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Darius Kuda. I'm one of the co-executive directors for this year's edition of the McGill International Portfolio Challenge. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Tanya, who is my co-executive director for the challenge, and also Professor Sebastian Patermier from McGill University. So I'd like to just start off by welcoming all of you to the MIPC. Whether you know a little bit about us or whether this is your first time hearing about us, we'd love to introduce the challenge to you over the next 20 to 30 minutes, going through who we are as a competition, our renowned cases and themes, the benefits we offer, and a little bit about the logistics of the challenge. We are live today, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type it out in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the webinar. And then we will address all questions at following the end of our presentation. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to Professor Patermier to introduce the challenge.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I can only stay for 30 minutes today, but I will start by giving you a bit of a history of the MIPC. It's a competition that started in 2017. I had a group of students coming to my office having done case competitions in the past, but noticing that the bulk of the case competitions that they were doing were mostly focused on the sell side of finance. Think of trading competitions, investment banking competitions, risk management, and they noticed there was no buy-side investment challenge where you can design a portfolio and being evaluated on the thought process for a large institutional manager. And we discussed, and as the project came along, we decided to turn this competition into a societal grand challenge, a challenge that goes beyond a typical case competition, where every year we pick a theme, and it's a theme of interest to society as a whole, where finance can play a positive role. It's a hard problem. Think of climate change. Think of the retirement shortfall, and how can finance managers ultimately create a long-term portfolio that addresses that issue. This is a challenge where the organizing students came to see me, and we decided to keep it a student-based initiative. And so you have here Tanya and Darius, two leaders of this year's MIPC team. They're leading a team of 8 students. It's a challenge organized by students, for students. We also have in the background a second team, an academic team that is in charge of writing the case through a course that I teach. It's a complex case, open-ended every time. We'll talk more about what the case looks like this year. And we're proud to say that over the past 4 years, the challenge has really grown into arguably the world's largest buy-side competition. Last year, we had 90 teams competing for $50,000 of cash prizes. We had more than 30 experts coming in to review the proposals. And the quality keeps going up year by year, and we're very excited to see what this year is going to look like. What we aim to achieve, first and foremost, what we want out of this is to solve a complex societal problem in which long-term buy-side managers can play a critical role. How? Well, through the portfolio decisions that they make. Again, think of the retirement shortfall. It's a huge issue. This is a role where finance leaders can actually, a topic where the finance leaders can play a role. Second goal that we have is to bridge academic thought with industry experience. These may not necessarily be topics that you've learned in school, but it exposes you to those topics, and you can think about it from an academic perspective, and we want you to come up with a thinking outside the box type of proposal that ultimately you're going to pitch to industry leaders. And they will evaluate the proposal based on how pragmatic and feasible it is. And so at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're bridging academic thought with industry experience. 3, we aim to attract the brightest students and finance leaders from around the world. One of the great aspects of this challenge is you have complex questions. They tend to be universal problems, but by listening to the proposal by students from Asia, from Australia, from Europe, from the US, from Canada, from South America, we have a diversity of perspectives where ultimately you get to hear what others pitch, and you get to develop a network of other students with the same values. 4, we aim to offer large rewards and incentives. We have $50,000 of cash prizes. This is more than most finance competitions you can compete. And our idea is simple. We want to align incentives. So if we offer big prizes, this will incite high quality proposals. And it does. And finally, we want to go beyond the challenge itself and ultimately share sustainable finance solutions with the broader community. And so we're working on a project at the moment to convert cases into documents for the broader community as a whole. You've already seen on our website that we work on writing briefs about the winning solutions. We will continue to do that. And increasingly, we have a goal to make those accessible to our broader community because at the end of the day, these are complex problems and the solutions that come out of this challenge are quite interesting. What you can expect out of this challenge. First, you can expect to work on an open-ended, real problem. Every year, we look for a core societal issue for which there's no clear solution. It is a very timely issue, in particular in this current edition. We're going to create a fictional scenario. It will be a fictional fund to avoid pointing fingers at everybody. But the case itself is meant to be quite universal and quite realistic. Okay, and so the solution is the scenario is based on a real life problem and will ask you to develop solutions that are broadly applicable. Second, we're going to ask you to design a long-term portfolio allocation that aims to address that issue. And as you can see, the case of last year, there was we'll talk more about it, a case on climate change. And at the end of the day is how do we design a long-term portfolio allocation that is not only good for the investment fund, but can also have a positive impact on the environment at the same time. And so you need to think more than just the profitability aspect of the challenge and think about how it addresses the need of multiple stakeholders at once. Third, we want a challenge that is creative and solutions that are they're creative and pragmatic. So at the end of the day, what we find is the best teams, when they propose proposal to the challenge, the proposals oftentimes strike a balance between outside of the box thinking and ideas that can be implemented in practice. And you need to strike that balance because you can have a very creative proposal that doesn't stand a chance when you're being asked on the assumptions. And it needs to be creative at the same time because otherwise the problems are so complex that it may not go anywhere otherwise. And finally, you will be evaluated on a forward-looking basis. This is not a portfolio that you get to trade for 3 months. This is a pitch that you make about how to design a long-term portfolio for a fund. And so as of today, we have no idea whether the solution is going to work or not. And so we're going to evaluate you based on the thought process that goes on behind the challenge, how convincing that pitch is at having a real impact down the road on an ex-ante basis. Again, the themes that we propose center around a complex societal issue that has no clear solution, a fictional fund. You'll see, and you can look at that from looking at the past cases, there's a broad range of stakeholders that have competing interests, and that is very much mimicking what you'll find in real life. The board of governors oftentimes consist of stakeholders with very different objectives. And oftentimes, the themes center around, again, addressing the core issue while being profitable, sustainable for the fund. So in the case of last year, for example, we looked at climate change. We had a fictional fund based in Canada. This was a Canadian fund last year. It doesn't mean that it's going to be in Canada every year. It was a fund based in Newfoundland and Labrador. It was under pressure to divest from oil and gas. And you can check the news. This is a problem that many universities and institutional funds faced everywhere. But they also have a mandate to satisfy the needs of the pensioners. And they have stakeholders, including the government, taxpayers, indigenous groups, unions, and pensioners of the plan. And so how do you design a long-term strategy that ultimately helps the fund to have positive impact on the environment? It could include a divestment. It doesn't have to. These are the questions that we want you to think about, whether it does make sense or not in the context of the fund. This year, I cannot tell you what the case is about. We will release the case as soon as registration is over, but I can tell you the following already. It's going to be on a very relevant topic, building on the COVID-19 crisis. As you keep reading in the news, the crisis has temporarily halted international exchanges and travels. It has decelerated the process of globalization. We're seeing today that countries are increasingly seeking independence and isolation. We're observing protectionist narratives around the world. We're observing geoeconomic dynamics are changing. And we're observing that these effects have a huge impact on marginalized groups and minorities that do not have the same access to the same level of care as others. And so, again, there's going to be a specific context, and I cannot release it yet. But the questions that you'll be asked to answer will be, okay, how should a large institutional manager invest over the long term in the midst of rising protectionist tendencies and social inequalities? And at the end of the day, how can you have a positive impact at all levels? So how can you invest in a way that are both profitable and socially equitable? And so this will be the theme of this year. You'll see once you start reading at the details of the case how this pans out. One aspect that we work hard is to provide a high caliber of judges and speakers. It is essential that to ensure quality and value for all stakeholders, we have great quality of proposals from the students, and we also have great judges to evaluate the quality of your proposals, and inspiring speakers to share their expertise and experience on the topic. So last year, we had Jean Charest, who was the former Premier of Quebec, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, who came to give the keynote address. We had a symposium featuring José Guibord, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Evolugen by Brookfield Renewables, one of the largest infrastructure companies in the renewable space in Canada. Discussing with Patrick Audier, who is the Senior Managing Partner of Lombard Odier Group, one of the largest financial institutions in Switzerland, to speak about how they approach ESG investing over the long term and how can they find win-win solutions that provide value to all stakeholders. And we had Jeffrey Rubin, the Chief Investment Strategist of CPP Investments. For those who do not know CPP, it is the largest institutional fund in Canada with more than $300 billion of investments, who came to judge the winning proposals and also speak at the final ceremony about how CPP aims to achieve those goals. We had more than 35 judges last year. You can see from the statistics that we had a mix of very high-level executives, younger managers as well, who can provide multiple perspectives to the issue. And ultimately, when semi-finalist teams came to present, there was a very healthy mix of risk managers, portfolio managers, vice principals on the entire asset allocation, so that at the end of the day, your proposals could be judged along multiple dimensions. Tanya.
All right. So moving on to a topic that I know many of you will be interested in, the price structure. So in terms of the price structure, as was mentioned before by you, Professor, the MIPC actually offers one of the largest price structures in the world. Every year, we offer about $50,000 in cash prizes to our participants to reward them for the quality of their proposals. Now, I'll just quickly walk you through how those different prices are categorized and how they're divided. It's quite simple, but it's a little bit different from what we had in past editions. So basically, our finalist teams, our top 5 teams, will be splitting up $40,000 in cash prizes. And traditionally, we had a typical 1 through 5 type of structure, whereby we would reward teams 1 through 5 with different amounts of money. But this year, in an effort to foster collaboration, we've decided to change that up a little bit and offer a top proposal prize that will be awarded to up to 3 teams if their proposals are of equal merit. And then the remainder of the $40,000 will be shared amongst the remaining of the top 5. This year, we've also decided to introduce a few new prizes to reward proposals that offer unique value to the challenge. We know how much work you've been putting into creating proposals that are both creative and pragmatic. We know how much effort that takes, and we want to make sure that we're able to reward that and to reward the specific value that your proposal is bringing to the table. And so we have decided to allocate part of our budget to awarding different types of creative thinking that we believe brings a lot of value to the challenge. So for example, we'll have prizes such as Best Quantitative Analysis or Best Display of Diversity of Thought and Perspectives. We'll be giving out some details on those prizes very soon, but ultimately, once again, we want to make sure that we're rewarding all of you for the efforts that you're putting into the challenge. Now, as always, we will also be rewarding some individual prizes, most notably the Best Speaker Award that will be awarded to 5 participants that have demonstrated outstanding oral communication skills throughout the challenge. But of course, the MIPC isn't just going to be giving out some monetary benefits to our participants. We're also very much committed to offering a whole educational experience that allows you to learn and grow alongside other bright minds in the world and be able to derive value from some of the leaders of the financial industry. So every year, as you know, we will host a symposium, and so this year will be no exception. We'll have, as always, a panel of C-suite and other high-profile executives that will engage the broader community on how finance can benefit society as a whole, and not just a lucky few. And of course, this will be broadcasted live, so you will all have the opportunity to ask questions to the speakers that will be coming in to talk about these extremely relevant topics that we'll be covering. Another thing that we're launching this year for our virtual edition is a speaker series. So we actually thought it would be interesting for companies to be sharing with you all, the participants, some of the knowledge and the expertise that they're cultivating from within. And so essentially our speaker series will be composed of short TED-style talks that will be delivered by senior executives from the different sponsors that are supporting us. And participants, once again, will be able to ask some questions live and engage later on in smaller groups to have discussions on the topic after the main event. That gives you a chance to connect among yourselves as well. And last but not least, we're also launching a mentorship program this year. So we know that the current context is quite difficult and quite stressful for all of you. And navigating this financial industry right now in the context of COVID-19 is very hard. So we wanted to give our sponsors a chance to give back and also an opportunity to continuously improve the quality of the proposals through this mentorship program that we're launching. So essentially, the semifinalist teams will each be matched to a mentor from one of our sponsors. They will act kind of as an independent sounding board for you to give a dry run of your presentation and get feedback from them. And they will be able to offer you some advice and some of their perspective on how you're doing and what you could be improving upon prior to the competition. Now, apart from the educational benefits that we offer you, we also offer you quite a few recruitment opportunities, actually. And one thing that I should mention is that, of course, one of the reasons why our sponsors come back every year is because they're, just like we are, very passionate with the issues that we tackle, with our mission, with our vision. But they're also very interested in all of you, actually. And every year, it's a great opportunity for them to network with bright and talented students such as yourselves, and hopefully to recruit a few interesting candidates. Every year, we actually have quite a high success rate with participants that have successful interviews, some of them that end up getting hired later on. And so we'll really be doing our best in order to maximize the recruitment opportunities for you all throughout this process. And one thing that we've actually decided to implement this year that is different from the past years is that whereas in the past you only essentially had 2 days to network with your sponsors during the main 2-day event, and you know that networking was usually reserved only to the top 25 teams because they would be the teams coming to Montreal that would be able to meet with sponsors in person. This year, we're actually spreading out the recruitment timeline to give you more opportunities to network with some industry professionals. And so recruitment will be essentially taking place over a 2-month period instead of only over 2 days. And it will be open to all participants and not just the top 25 teams that make it to the final round. So we'll be collecting your resumes and creating resume books for sponsors. They'll be able to host private info sessions where they can tell you a little bit more about their company, what it is that they do, and what differentiates them from others. They'll also have the opportunity to interview you directly. As mentioned prior, there will be a mentorship program where they can give you some advice on your proposal and what you can improve upon. They'll also be hosting some virtual booths throughout the 2-day event. So again, for those of you who have been with us in prior years, we usually have in-person booths at the MIPC, but this year, of course, since the edition is virtual, we'll be having some virtual booths. So sponsors will come in, once again, be able to talk to you, discuss network, and so on. And of course, we will be showcasing your proposals, both your written submissions and your video submissions, so that they get an idea of how you behave, in a sense, in a professional setting. And there will be a lot of one-on-one networking opportunities. And just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the sponsors that we've had in the past, we're working with very, very big names of the financial industry, both in Canada and in the world. So as Professor mentioned, we're working very closely, for example, with CPP Investments that have been with us since the beginning of the MIPC, but also sponsors such as BlackRock, PSP Investments, CIBC, KPMG. So really a lot of big names once again. And this year we've been able to actually sign a few new sponsors that will be adding to the sponsor cohort, which is of course something that we're very excited about, very happy about, especially in the current context where the financial pressures are quite hard on most financial institutions. So that's great news for both us and for you. And at this point, you may be wondering, well, how is this all going to work, right? I mean, how are we going to be competing in a virtual format? How are we going to be judged? And essentially, not much is changing from the in-person format. So we'll still be having 3 rounds in terms of logistics. We'll have the first round where you'll be submitting your written report. So you'll have a maximum of 7 pages to submit, but you can add some appendices as well as an executive summary that will be required for this year. And then from that point on, we'll have a week to review all of the proposals and select the top 25 that will advance to the next round, the semifinal round. So you will have a few more weeks to revise your solutions as necessary with the help of your mentors. And then you will be invited to record your presentation ahead of time and submit them to our platform. And during the 2-day event of the competition, you will be invited to take part in a 15-minute live Q&A where the judges will be asking you questions on your proposal and kind of try to test the solidity of your arguments. And from that point on, they will pick a top 5 that will advance to the next round, to the final round that will take place the day after. So this will all be taking place live. You will be presenting live and having questions live. And so it's going to be 10-minute of live presentation and 15-minute Q&A. Now, in terms of how the proposals will be judged by our panel of experts, they will be judged mainly on 3 different factors: quality and professionalism, analytical rigor, and your response to case details. Now I'll pass it along to Darius, who will walk you through some of the other logistical details of the competition.
Thank you, Tanya. So as Professor Bertame mentioned before, our cases are challenging, and they require really a lot of diverse perspectives in order to find solutions that meet all the stakeholders' needs in our cases. So we at the MIPC, we very much encourage diversity within a team on a number of different levels, because we found these types of teams that bring a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different educational backgrounds and experiences, and different sort of life perspectives. We found that those kinds of teams tend to perform better with our cases because they are really so multifaceted. There's so many sort of different moving parts and different stakeholders that you have to sort of account for. So we see diversity on 3 different levels. First is just in general your field of study. Our cases, while this is a finance competition, creating portfolios, our cases are not designed to only be understood by purely finance students. But rather, there's very much space for people from multiple backgrounds of study, such as other business programs, from political science programs or other arts programs, to come in and make contributions, because our cases are quite broad in that sense. We very much encourage a diversity in the skill sets of the people on your team. So ranging from portfolio modeling, economic theory, writing, public speaking, and so forth. And then we also very much value diversity in thought from our teams, because as you said, our cases do sort of encompass a lot of different stakeholders. Having teams with a diversity of experiences will sort of perform better at seeing through the different lenses of the stakeholders in the case. So kind of like timeline-wise, our registration for this year's edition of the MIPC ends on Sunday at 11:59 Eastern Time. And then from there, the day after, we will launch the case, and then teams will have 3 weeks to come up with their written proposals for the first round, submitted by October 4th. And then from there, as Sunny mentioned, we will take a week to review those on our end and get back to the top 25 semifinalist teams who will move on to the next round. And then from there, teams have another 3 weeks to both revise their existing proposals and also create and record their presentation before answering Q&A on their presentation live on November 5th. And then the top 5 teams from the semifinals will advance to the finals the day after, November 6th. So we've been quite successful over the past few years at attracting universities really from all around the world to the MIPC. This is just kind of a snapshot of past universities who have participated in the MIPC, and many of these come back year after year. Some send 1 team from the school, some send 8. So we really encourage new schools to send as many teams as they would like. We've hosted over 70 universities from around the world. We welcome teams really from almost every continent around the world. So we really bring a diversity of people to the challenge in terms of the students that participate. And so we welcome you, whether you've been with us for a few years, whether it's your first time. We would absolutely welcome you to the MIPC this year. So that more or less concludes our formal presentation on who we are. We hope you've seen that we give you a chance to work on a real impactful societal issue with our cases. Think from the perspectives of professional managers and be able to present to them directly. We offer a lot of recruiting benefits with our prestigious sponsors who represent among the largest asset managers and financial institutions in the world. Participating in the MIPC, and especially winning some of our top prizes, gives you substantial visibility for your university, and also you have the benefit of the prizes themselves. So that concludes our formal presentation. We welcome any questions you may have had on stuff we did talk about, on stuff we did not talk about, or anything in between. So please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box on the right side of the webinar. So I'll just read out our first question. Can you form a team with students from multiple universities? So this is a very common question that we get all the time. The answer to that is yes. You can form a team with students from multiple universities. One single team does not have to have students from the same university. That being said, only for the purposes of award recognition, your team may only quote unquote represent one university, but otherwise it does not matter. We have a question. Do you have any advice for approaching a professor? I guess Professor Bertermier, do you want to take that question?
Yeah. What I would suggest is, so what we have noticed is that teams with committed advisors end up doing well. And they end up doing well because they're able to access a sounding board prior to the finale, where they can present to a professor, get feedback, update, get feedback, and they're ready. We have seen multiple times that you have a great team, great idea, it's creative, it goes on the right path, but they haven't had enough feedback prior to the grilling in front of the judges in November, where ultimately the presentation breaks apart at the end. So what we would recommend is to look for professors who, one, have a track record of coaching case competitions, professors who are interested, generally speaking, in long-term institutional management, and come into these professors and say, hey, we have a team. We would like to participate. Propose a solution that does not take too much of the professor's time, because they tend to be quite busy as the semester unfolds. And then it is up to you to follow up the professor saying, you know what, we have a draft. Are you able to just take a look at our draft? We would like to present to you over the course of 20 minutes. Can you go back and give us feedback? Some professors will invest more time than others, but I would be very organized and say, this is what we are looking for, so that this is not a time drain. And oftentimes, once you have that initiative that you bring, it is a good way to approach a professor on this.
Thank you, Professor Berterme. We have a kind of a follow-up question on that. Can students register without an advisor? The answer is yes. If you're just a team of four students, yes, you can apply without. You don't necessarily have to have an advisor to participate in the challenge, although we do recommend it. Our next question is related to registration. So if we already have 4 people as a team and we would like to enroll as a team, do we all need to register and send you an email telling you the team members, or just one of us needs to do it? So how our registration works is only one person has to formally register through our website, pay a registration fee, and then you will be matched with one of our team members on our externals team that each handle a different region of the world. So if you're a team from North America, Grace will be handling you, for example, and they will follow up with you and ask for the exact composition of your team, and then we'll take it from there. Our next question is, will we receive any sort of competition manual or guide to take reference from in order to pursue our analysis and provide a specific structure? I think Professor Berterme, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, so this year, for the first time actually, we're going to have, as soon as the registration is launched, a few days afterwards, we're going to have a bit of an onboarding call similar to the one we have now, where I will provide more details about the case. I mean, you will have read about the case, but also strategies on what makes a good proposal in the end. I also encourage you to look at the pedagogical notes that we have written. They're posted on the website. You will see the 3 prior cases. We have written pedagogical notes about the winning proposals. These notes are extremely useful because they will show you the mindset that the winning teams have taken to solve the proposals. And so what we are doing in the pedagogical notes is just rewriting in a simple 2-page summary the thought process that the winning teams have taken to solve the case. And you'll find that they all provide different perspectives and different suggestions on how to solve the case. But by going through them, it will give you a really good sense of what is needed from your end in order to have a shot at the finals.
Thank you, Professor. Our next question is, as an individual team, is there any opportunity to have mentor assistance from the MIPC 2020 pool of industry experts? So as we mentioned, we do have our mentorship program that is unfortunately only limited to our top 25 semifinals teams. But the mentors for the semifinals teams may not necessarily also be a judge in the challenge. However, if your mentor is a judge in the challenge, they will not actually judge you in the challenge for conflict of interest reasons. Our next question is our performance going to be considered by the McGill admission committee if any of us are interested in pursuing a degree or PhD further in McGill? So maybe we just to clarify with the McGill International Portfolio Challenge, we unfortunately do not allow McGill students to participate for conflict of interest reasons. But otherwise, with regards to education level, whether you are an undergraduate student, whether you are a master's student or a PhD student, you are seen the exact same way.
So Darius, if I can follow up on that, I think the question is really targeting, are we connected to the McGill Admission Committee for those who are planning to pursue a PhD or so forth? The answer is no, we're not directly connected. Again, this is an independent team of, 2 teams of students working on this challenge under the umbrella of the university. So any application there will not be reviewed by the McGill Admission Committee. However, the proposals that you bring, if it is a really, really good proposal, this is something that you can include in your portfolio once you apply to graduate school. I mean, this is exactly the type of work that shows your thought process going above and beyond the coursework that you take at school. And so any bright ideas that you suggest there, ultimately, we encourage you to include it in whatever applications you submit to graduate schools or any programs afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for following up on that. Our next question is, will the MIPC be all in English? And the answer to that is yes. However, if for example, your English is a second language to you, you're not as comfortable speaking in English, you will be penalized in any way by your judges. They're fully aware that we are a very global challenge and we get students from all around the world. But that may not necessarily be fluent in English. So that is not a factor that is taken into account, as long as you were still able to convey your thoughts properly.
And in addition, Darius mentioned earlier the 3 pillars that we look at when we look at winning proposals, which is quality of presentation and report, professionalism, rigorousness of the analysis, and the third one, ability to respond to the case. That third one is the key pillar. Is your proposal able to provide a sustainable solution to this case? You don't need to speak great English to have that proposal. If you have a bright idea and it is pragmatic and it is clever, that pillar is the most important.
Great. Our next question is, do I have access to recruiting opportunities even if my team is not in the top 25? So your answer to that is yes. So that's one of the key changes we're making to the challenge this year is extending sort of the recruitment opportunities past just like the last sort of 2-day finals, what we call the weekend, throughout the whole 2-month challenge period. So we will, even before the semifinals happen at all, or the finals week, we'll be hosting a series of events with our sponsors, ranging from info sessions to speaker series. Every sponsor will receive the full resume book from all participants in the MIPC. If you seem like an interesting candidate to one or more of our sponsors, they have the ability to invite you to a one-on-one interview. So the short answer is yes, you will still have access to these opportunities even if you don't make the top 25. However, there will be a few select events that are only available to our semifinals teams, but the vast majority will be available to everybody. Our next question is, which countries' accounting standards will be followed for structuring our portfolios? I think, Professor, can you answer that?
So this will become very clear to you once you receive the case. Every year, we look at a different setting. So last year, it was a fund in Newfoundland and Labrador. The previous year, it was an American fund in a fake province called Vandalia. I cannot tell you what this fund's this year will be, but once the case is launched, you will have a clear sense of the exact setting in which our fund takes place. And again, this is going to be a fictional fund in an environment that is applicable to multiple jurisdictions.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, how will people present live during the semifinals and finals if they're in different time zones? So that's a very sort of key consideration we have to take this year with a virtual challenge. So the answer to that is, depending on where you are in the world, we will accommodate the presentation time slots based on where you are. So you're not terribly like inconvenienced by having to present at, for example, like 4 a.m. at your local time. That will not happen. If you're sort of far off in the, for example, like in Asia, where the time difference is like 12 hours from where we are in Montreal, you may have to present at night, but it won't be anything too inconvenient. So as questions come in, I think we'll answer one question that came in during the presentation. What kind of investments do you try and do in your proposals in terms of asset classes and geographies? So the answer to that is there's no specific restrictions on what asset classes you can invest in, whether it be equities, fixed income, alternative investments, or where geographically you can invest. You'll be invested to sort of pitch an allocation for the full portfolio from top-down basis. So you really choose how to allocate across different asset classes and geographies. There's no specific restrictions on that. Our next question: how big should teams be? Should all members be from the same university? So our teams you can have a maximum of 4 students on your team. And students on one individual team can come from multiple universities. You don't necessarily have to all be from the same university. It can be a mix. However, what I will say is, just for the purposes of award recognition, so like at least in person, like the university would write on the check, like if you win, you can only represent one university in that sense. But otherwise, team members can come from multiple universities. Our next question: how will you take into account different time zones? So there's a few parts to this. So we have, over the next 2 months, starting I guess next week when we release the case, ranging from our intro sessions to our speaker series to our symposium and all that. To the extent that we can, we will host those at times that are sort of accessible to anyone wherever they are in the world. So like in our time, would be sort of kind of like 10 a.m. like our time, which while for like people in Asia that is slightly late, at least it's not in the middle of the night. But to the extent that we can, we will record the sessions if possible, particularly if our sponsors are comfortable with it. So you can go back and review those sessions later or at a time of your choice. And then in terms of the actual live presentations and Q&A, again, we will schedule those individually with teams to make sure that they're not presenting at a too inconvenient of a time, depending on where they are in the world. So we'll do our best to accommodate that aspect, because we are a very international competition. Our next question is: would the investment universe be a worldwide real-time one, or would it be a fiction of the case itself? So the case itself will structure around a fictional fund, but sort of what you invest in, like, it will be, how do you say, like real life things. Like those won't be fictional. Like you won't have like fictional companies to invest in or whatever. Our next question: are prizes expressed in Canadian or US dollars? It is 50,000 Canadian dollars. So we are a Canadian challenge. Our next question: will the challenge be all in English? So you will be asked to come up with your proposals and present them in English. But what we will say is, we know that we host students from all around the world whose first language may not be English, may not be fully comfortable writing and speaking in English. And our judges are very very aware of that, and they take special they make sure not to introduce any sort of bias against that, because they know that most of a big chunk of our teams do come from around the world. I think, at least in terms of current registrations, I think 50% of our currently registered teams are outside North America, so that won't be a barrier for anyone.
Yeah, on top of that, I'll just mention the fact that one thing that we did implement this year was the recording of the presentations. And so that gives you a little bit more time, if you're not a native English speaker, to kind of brush up on the presentation itself and to make sure that you're presenting kind of the best version of your work to the judges.
Okay, we have a question. How many teams can one individual school send? So there's no limit. I mean, as I said before, like you could have, your school could send like one team, your school could send like 8. There's really no limit. When you submit your submissions, we ask you to submit them like under a team name and not under your university name, so that we, avoid any potential bias with the judges towards specific universities. So theoretically, if your school sent 25 teams and they all, theoretically all 25 teams could, be semifinals teams if their proposals are of enough merit. So there's really no limit to that. Okay, that seems like that was the extent of the questions from the audience. We just got one more come in. Can we email Professor Berterme for any technical information? So I would assume that would relate more to the case itself. If you do have questions for Professor Berterme, of course, he'd be very much willing to answer any questions regarding that. He takes the time to read every single team submission, whether we get hopefully 90 teams, 100 teams, whatever, 200 teams, however many we get this year. He takes care to read all of them because this is his challenge. So yes, you can email him for those types of questions. Yes. So if there's no other questions from the audience, I just kind of like to conclude by thanking you for joining us today. We hope you got a lot out of this info session. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at the email you see on the screen, external@mipc.ca. And then just as a reminder, our registration for this year's challenge closes this Sunday, September 13th at 11:59 p.m. And you can register at our website, www.mipc.ca. So with that, I think we'll end the webinar. Thanks for joining and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.